Let me borrow your agenda.
They're right here. Oh.
It was an urban. So then I was
Thank you. Nobody else is here. Yeah. I really don't have
I'll show it to you in just a few minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and begin. We appreciate your being here and move forward in our meeting. Do we have anyone that feels like they would like to offer a prayer this morning? Seeing none? Great.
There was one there.
Oh, is there? Where's the hand?
Right there.
Oh, okay. And then anyone on Pledge of Allegiance? You get your name in the minutes. Okay, who was it? Larry? All right, and if you would thank you, Jason Christensen and Larry Ballard on that. Dear our most loving, caring Heavenly Father, hallowed be thy name. We're grateful to be here on thy land, this land of liberty, to teach liberty, to live liberty, to be respectful to our neighbors and all and those around us. Please bless that in this meeting today. Rights that thou hast given us, rights such as property may be respected, that speech may be respected, that thy Holy Spirit may reign within this meeting, that thy Holy Spirit may guide our tongues appropriately. And I say these things in the name of thy Son, our Lord, Savior, and King, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both for participating in those today. All right, with that, the first item on the agenda is that a public comment. May I see by a show of hands those who are here and plan to make public comment, please? Raise your hands high. Okay. So we do ask that in accordance with our administrative rules that we attempt not to be redundant, that we limit to 3 minutes, and we will proceed. So who's going to come first? Let me say one. I'm sorry. I apologize. I recognize that many of you are here probably for a BRT discussion. Part of the agenda, an item on the agenda today, is to set a public hearing for that particular issue on May 12th at 9 a.m. And so that would be the designated time for BRT comments in conjunction with action associated with BRT. Thank you.
We'll always get that. Nevertheless, the agenda item does start the legislative act that does start if there is a referendum process.
I am Peter Anderson Forum. In 1976, there was a meeting in Vancouver, British Columbia. And at that time, the UN Conference on Human Settlements said that there shouldn't be any private property. And I thought that was rather ludicrous if they would say there is no private property. The United States is one of the few countries where you're going to have mineral rights, water rights. But they said, no, you can't have any of that. I thought, well, the UN, they're someplace else. Then the leading socialist from Norway, who also was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, had Our Common Future. Our Common Future. You can buy this book. Everything I'm telling you, you can call a lie or you can look it up and verify it. She said there that we must have things that are sustainable. What in the world? Sustainable? Sure, we want to have things sustainable. Well, that brought another young man online, Maurice Strong, is a multi-billionaire out of Canada. By the way, I asked one of the people running for the county commission if he knew what Agenda 21 was, and he said, yeah, it's the government's 21 points. I thought, okay. You obviously don't know what Agenda 21 is. Agenda 21 is the agenda for the 21st century. This is put out by the United Nations. And there was 176 countries that signed this document, including George W. Bush. He came back and he said, I signed it, but it's soft law. I wrote our Senator Hatch and he says, oh, it's soft law. It doesn't mean anything. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're brilliant. And I thought, well, let's see what Clinton did. Clinton put out an executive order, Executive Order 12852. You can look this up. And he instituted the Sustainable America and America's Economy and Society. And he had on his committee the same people that were on this committee to put it into private property. And I thought, oh my gosh, our senator believes it's soft law. Clinton put out an executive order saying all this stuff has to be done. And then a few years later, this is by the way the laws. And then a few years later, they came up with this little book, about 1,300 pages of rules. And it says you can't have dams, you can't have roads, you can't have private property. And so, you know, there's certain states that are taking the lead. They're destroying dams, they're destroying roads, They're closing off areas where people have been able to go for years. People in San Juan County are gonna lose another half of the county because they want to make the park down there longer. In this book, this is what they teach kids. You are a sinner for being born. You should be guilty because you're ruining the earth. This is what's being taught to the children in the agenda for the 21st century. And it was further codified with smart growth. Now, our planning department follows this thing to the hilt. And was it last year or 2 years ago, they came in with a proposal to put a easement around the lake and take away private property for all the lake owners so that we could have a bike trail around the lake that changes every 5 minutes. This BRT is just one more thing, but
Mr.
my
Anderson,
point is not about BRT. My point is about you're following a communist agenda.
what's your comment? Okay. Other comments?
Back in 1792, oh, sorry, Jason Christensen, former candidate for the parole mayor, back in 2013, as well as the chairman of the Independent American Party here in Utah County. But back in 1792, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, wrote a white paper, an op-ed piece. One line says, in a former sense, a man's land or merchandise or money is called his property. BRT will cost a minimum of 75,000 taxpayer funds, our money from the local, 75 million, from the feds, totaling 150 million bare minimum. And these things always are underestimated on the cost, and always has strings attached. Let me also throw that out too. James Madison also in that same article, white page, says government, meaning you three, government is instituted to protect property of every sort as well that which lies in the various rights of individuals as that which the term particularly expresses, this being the end of government, that own is a just government which impartially secures to every man whatever his own, meaning property rights is a God-given right. One has a right to be safe within the property, and I don't care what some rogue judge says about eminent domain, but eminent domain is unconstitutional, and eminent domain will be used along the 9th East, as well as other areas. So I encourage you to be respectful of the Constitution, which you've sworn to uphold and defend, and which property rights is protected by the Constitution, and be very thoughtful when it comes to our taxpayer funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Julie Renier from Provo City. Good morning. Thank you. I don't even know who this gentleman is, but I live on 900 East. You're going to take my property from BRT. That's not actually what I'm really concerned about. I'm more concerned about the many, many citizens in Utah County who still do not know anything about the BRT. I talk frequently with people that when the BRT comes up, they're like, what's the BRT? And when I continue to let them know that it's a proposed route by UTA I give them all the details that I already know you know about. They're very concerned. Wait, we're paying for this? Wait, and then we won't be able to help other serious issues that need this, and we already have the exact route and a bus that has plenty of room. They're very, very concerned. So once again, I'm just here. I have a letter that was written by another citizen that wasn't able to make it, and I just want to share some points with them, from them, They said it's like buying, I'll read it. We have attended the majority of meetings since this issue began. We have met as neighbors and sat on committees. To increase the amount of buses, sizes of buses, and frequency of travel of said buses is like buying a mansion. BRT vehicles for a family of 3, average ridership we count on a daily basis traveling 99 fees. And then mandating that the entire county pay the mortgage, the bond. Simple example, but I'm sure you get the point. Our 12-year-old, hearing about this issue over time, came up with the comparison at breakfast today. So I just encourage you, please let us, the citizens of this county, let it go to a vote. Inform them, let them know about BRT, and let us decide instead of you. Please slow down. And I know you think it's best for us. However, we already have a system, and it's effective, it's working, and it needs lots more riders on it before we spend a lot more money, and there's lots more things in our county that we can spend it on. Thank you.
Would it surprise you to know the number of people that actually use that route these days?
You know what? I witness it. It passes in front of my house every 15 minutes, and so I know.
Would it surprise you to know there's over 2,500?
On the whole route? Okay, but it's sufficient. We don't need a bigger bus, and it's working. So why go into debt? You know, I think as a culture we have taught not to go into debt, to be self-sufficient, and right now we will have to subsidize. It's not just the 150 million. It's going to be the continuing cost of BRT too that will have to subsidize.
I understand. Thank you.
We going anywhere?
Pam Jones, Provo, and I would like to urge the commission to allow the referendum. All the people in the county need to have a voice in spending so much money and making such extensive changes in the infrastructure. And finally, no new taxes. I am not George H. Bush.
Merritt, Watkins, Provo City. So there's been some talk about subsidizing transit. Every time we drive, we're subsidized. It takes about $10 for every dollar we spend to make sure we can drive on the roads. And by 2040 or 2050, Utah County will double in population. Now, we have spent in the last 10 years about $2 billion on freeways. And those freeways are going to last about 10 or 15 years. So which are we actually subsidizing more? Are we subsidizing transit more, or are we subsidizing people who drive? And as we grow, how can we keep maintaining the same amount of cars or an increase of cars on the same roads? We would have to buy more roads, which the cities already cannot afford. We spend 93% of our budget building roads and 7% maintaining those roads. And if you attend MAG meetings, the mayors of Utah County wonder, how are we paying for the roads? Because they don't know. BRT and
they don't know where it's going to come from.
Yes, they don't know how they're going to pay for the maintenance on those roads. Now, it's going to come from an increase of taxes probably. Now, mass transit, it will actually reduce the wear and tear on the roads by 30%. And the voters actually have spoken out on this in 2006 when they passed the 1/4% sales tax that covers transit. And it was passed, with a majority vote. So people have had, and this has been on the long range plan for 15 years. There's been plenty of opportunity for people to speak their piece, whether for or against. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merlin Weeds from Orem, Utah. I wanted to just bring up a couple of points. I was watching the news today from our federal government. Hillary Clinton, for instance, running for office, we know at the issue. At all levels of government, we elect people to represent the people. I happen to be a precinct officer, and in watching this thing happen, one of the problems we have is that what is said by candidates is not always done once they get in office. I hear a lot of problems, mixed agendas, I believe, and it's very concerning to me because last fall I happened to vote for Commissioner Graves because he was against BRT at that point. I heard him last Saturday talk about he was here to represent the majority of the people. And I'm like previous speaker, I questioned how many of the people really know anything about BRT. I talked a lot about that with people. Very few know. The ones who do know, the great majority are against this. Last January, we, in our Utah County Republican Party meeting, they vetted both pro and con in the meeting, why for and why against. Then they took a vote. Over 2/3 of the vote.
Was this in the central committee that you were trying to?
Yes, January.
May I correct you on one thing? And I checked on this. I know it keeps being said that that was a 2/3 vote. It was not. It was a majority vote. A simple majority. It was not a 2/3.
No, it was actually 2/3.
No, it wasn't. I checked with the party secretary. It was a majority vote, and it was a close majority.
They asked for 2/3.
It came up in the subject, and then they said, no, we don't need it. Anyway, go ahead.
This last Saturday, I was pleased to hear Congressman Graves say he's here to support the majority of the people. Okay. My point is, the majority don't know most of what it is, but those few that I do know say the majority are opposed to the BRT. And I was told by one of the attendees this last Saturday, they had been talking to Congressman Graves. Pardon me, Commissioner Graves, thank you. And he was very much for it because we needed to get the money from the federal government. If we don't take it, somebody else will. Well, he recorded that. Okay. And I will. Okay. The point being is this. I believe that it's so important that we know what the wishes of the people are. If this was a free enterprise industry making this decision, we have a bus line already in place that is very much not occupied. I've been watching this for several months now, personally. From free enterprise, this would be a bad thing. We have something there we don't need to embellish further at this point. Not that we may not need to in the future. We don't know that yet. But my point is this. We need to know what the people want. We need to represent the people. Sometimes it's easy in politics to be misunderstood. But sometimes too, whatever level, federal, whatever, we hear people say one thing and then do another. And so I'd like to propose that we take the time to really find out what the people want, to represent them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Renee, what happened to your timer? Oh, okay, thank you.
Hello, I am Barbara Petty of Orem. I'm the state and county delegate. Recently at the Utah County Convention, the Utah Commissioners said they represent the people. And so if that's true, then you should be in favor of letting the people vote on this. I'm here to read some examples of people who oppose BRT as it's presently constituted.
And again, Barbara, how many do you have?
I just have
a couple that I'm quoting their names, and then I have the 2 or 3 statements as well. It won't.
Okay, proceed.
So I'm representing Utah Senator Hinkins and Senator Bramble. And Senator Al Jackson sent me this statement he would like read. He said, "It's my hope the Utah County Commissioners listen carefully to their constituents who are clearly concerned about the proposal in question. Being part of a constitutional republic affords the people the opportunity to have their thoughts and concerns heard by their elected officials. I encourage the process to reflect those values of our republic. Additionally, moving forward with any project of this magnitude deserves caution, as creating further dependence on the federal government for funding should be discouraged. Adding more to our already out-of-control national debt is not prudent. Transportation projects we pursue in Utah should be void of funding from an already overburdened federal government." And then Senator Dayton says she is opposed to the federalization of transportation. And she's also very concerned about the sustainability issue. Representative Andrade said that he opposes this present selection of BRT in these 2 cities. And it's not, he said, it's not going to increase leadership, as half of the buildings in downtown are empty. And it's a misallocation of resources. So we are standing forward to encourage you to pause in moving forward with this. If necessary, we will involve ourselves in the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
My name is David Harding, and I live in Merritt. I came knowing that there's going to be another public hearing in the future, but I wanted to step forward and let you know that there are residents in this valley who are for public transportation for this project. It is critical that we build up our public transportation infrastructure now so that we can maintain our quality of life as the population increases in the valley. A couple responses, a couple comments on what's been said. The public has been able to vote on public transportation. We did that. This is just the implementation of the taxes that we already agreed to. And then the other thing has been mentioned about majorities or the majority of people that they've talked to have been against it or for it. And I think this partly depends on the circles we run in. For myself, I have heard a vast majority of people I've talked to are very for BRT. They understand the importance of being able to move a lot of people quickly. This is very important to build up that system. It's underutilized right now because it's inconvenient. This will increase the convenience of our public transportation system, and it's going to be the backbone of a system that we're going to need in order to maintain our quality of life. Thank you.
Ron Eliason, I live in Provo. What was that?
She wants to hear you, Ron.
Good. I just have a couple of questions. How will the proposed BRT improve the traffic flow? And secondly, how will the rest of the county benefit from what takes place in Provo? Or will we get this information in this meeting or in the main meeting?
That would be appropriate in the main meeting, but I'll be glad to find somebody that can answer those questions for you offline if you like. I don't know that they're here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Colonel retired, Curtis Edwood, Forum, Utah. I, like many, am a transplant. I retired here by choice. because the state that I was born in and grew up in has completely lost their mind with these kind of projects. That would be California. They have several high-speed rail that I'm sure all of you tree huggers would really appreciate, that are now billions of dollars in debt, and they haven't even dug one hole, built one thing yet to get going with their rapid transit efforts for high-speed rail between Victorville, not Los Angeles, Victorville and Las Vegas, and then somewhere in the San Joaquin Valley from like Bakersfield up to Sacramento. These are wasteful projects. This BRT already has a system. There's already something there. I'm sorry, Commissioner, but 2,500 people, seriously? Or how many millions in the state?
That's the current system.
Yeah, but that's what they're using. I mean, that's the number of people that are using it now. And we just had our beloved trending more liberal every day legislature just voted more taxes on the gas. So now our gas tax will go up. And so, yeah, we'll pay more to hopefully maintain the roads. We would like to maintain the roads we have. You know, this BRT goes nowhere near anywhere that I live. I'll never use it. I don't use the current bus system. Why? You know, if I want to walk somewhere, I'm walking somewhere. I want to ride my bike somewhere, I'm going to ride my bike somewhere. And then when I go driving, I'm driving my car. So this is, you know, great for kids who are going to BYU, UVU, terrific. But they're here 3, 4, maybe 5 years, and then they're gone, moving somewhere else. This is a lot of money being spent. Oh yeah, by the way, our money, our taxes. This is money that we generated. You didn't generate, we generated, and then you taxed it from us. Okay? So be mindful of that. It's our money. And we need more of a say, and this thing needs to stop. Thank you. Thank you.
Sharon Anderson from Orem. A couple of comments. We've had a couple of references to the ballot in 2006 that the voters went to and voted on money for transit systems. And this has been used as an excuse to say the voters want BRT. Well, BRT was not on the ballot. And in fact, it was listed as an opinion poll. It turned out to be more than that. But I don't like to see that used as justification for the BRT. Barbara Petty read a couple of comments. I have an email from Brad Daw, and I'll make it really brief and kind of condense it, but he thanks all of you for serving our county. He says, I'm concerned about the bus rapid transit. The concern I hear has constantly been growing louder and includes a broader range of people. The facts that I've heard and the reasons I've been given led me to believe that taking a large pause on the bus rapid transit system is in order, whether that means putting to a referendum or simply creating dedicated lanes so they can try out the system. I urge you to take a breather and consider a longer term, more incremental approach. So he couldn't be here today, so I represent him by reading that. One of my big concerns about BRT, and I'll be brief because a lot of this has been said, is that the federal government is using their money to bribe us, to say, here, free cookies, you know, come get this free money. But the problem is, it is a federal project and it's designed by the feds. I have here, does your project qualify as a small start? And it's the government that's telling us what we need to do in order to get that money. The project has to have priority or preemption, level boarding, special branding of service, frequent service. There are a lot of requirements that we are required to meet in order to get those federal funds. If this were designed for our local needs, we would have it, and if we did decide we needed a bus rapid transit, it would go by the high schools, it would go by the medical facilities, it would really serve the people. The current route was chosen specifically because it met the federal guidelines, and the other proposed routes didn't. So I have concerns about that we are being bought off, or we're getting money so that we can have the federal government tell us what we need to do. One item here is that in Nashville, they've killed the BRT. And one final question, you're gonna have a hearing in May. Will that really solve the issue? One more hearing? How many people won't even hear about the hearing and still won't know what BRT is? One of the things the federal government wants to do, this is a livability principle, is remove barriers to collaboration. And I think very often the citizens are considered those barriers, and they want to take away our voice and maybe have a hearing so that we can say, oh, well, we had a hearing so that people have a chance to know what BRT is. And yet most of them still don't know, even after all the hearings that have been happening since the year began. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Peter Ream. I'm from Orem. I'm also, people mentioned this, I'm a Legislative Certification Officer, but I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here in my own capacity. In the 1980s, I was going to school at the University of South Florida, and the state university system, perhaps the entire government of Florida, made a deal to save money with the providers of floppy disks, and they got the amazingly low price of $1 per disk. Right after that happened, this multi-year contract became a real burden because the price of floppy disks dropped dramatically, and the company that they made the deal with couldn't produce reliable floppy disks. And so people were always complaining about having to bring their own disks that they bought for 25 cents or 50 cents or whatever it was, and sometimes they weren't allowed to use them because of the contract. I'm afraid that we're about to make a similar mistake. I am actually very excited about the prospect of public transit in the future. I had the idea, by the way, I was an inventor, turned into a patent attorney, went back to inventing, and that's how I support my family now. And every time that I have saved a client thousands of dollars that I could have made by telling them there's really nothing in their invention, I have later regretted it when I've seen that product on the market put out by somebody else. So now I look at what the future holds from visionary thing of what mass transit looks like, and I figured we're going to have self-driving cars soon, and it's going to creep up on us and overtake the world like cell phones did and smartphones did. And what's going to happen is that we're going to be sending our kids off to their soccer practice or whatever, 8 years old, 12 years old, doesn't matter, in a self-driving car. And public transit will look like vouchers for taxi rides, basically. There won't be taxi rides because there won't be a taxi driver, but right now that's the best model we have to look at, where an NX car can shuttle people from point A to point B without them having to wait for any place at a bus stop. So this is my response to having heard about the bus rapid transit system. So I thought, well, maybe somebody else has thought of this already. So I did a quick search and I found the Forbes magazine article about a year ago, and it mentioned a book. And the book is Curbing Cars, America's Independence from the Auto Industry by Micheline Maillard. And she quotes Donald Grimes, an economist, who writes, "But think about the potential for a driverless car as a mass transit vehicle," Grimes says. "Envision those driverless vehicles roaming the city. Someone calls a central dispatcher or sends an email or text message to a computer, which then identifies the nearest driverless vehicle and sends it to pick the passenger up. As the vehicle is en route to its destination, it can pick up other passengers on the way. It drops the passengers off at his or her preferred destination and goes on to pick someone else up. To me, the basis of future mass transit is not buses or trains running on fixed routes, but more of a sophisticated taxi system without drivers, and where the vehicles use sophisticated software and communication systems to pick up and deliver multiple passengers on any particular trip. Thank you very much. That was the end of the call. I did finish.
Gentlemen, you're very kind to listen to us. I've spoken to all of you at one time or another, and I appreciate your kindness and your fairness. Pardon? Oh, thank you. I'm Brad Barlow from American Ford, and I know you're listening to a lot of different data on a lot of different sides. Please consider this also. My brother just returned from Japan. They have a marvelous public transit system there. It's all private. I know that there's been a huge investment in government-funded things here in this area, but we're a very conservative county. We're probably the most conservative county in the most conservative state in the United States, which used to be the bastion of liberty and private enterprise. The world's really looking at us. And I think we need to take a look at trying to do things in the private, through the private sector, like the nation of Japan are outstripping what's being done here. They have a far better system, and it's all private. Now, with everything that's been done with the federal investment so far, we can't just pull out of it, but let's be very cautious and try to avoid further involvement through the federal government. And let's try to take control of our own systems, make it designed by us, make it serving our needs, and make it accomplishing our purposes within a tax burden that we can bear without increasing taxes and without seeking further money from the federal government. Let's try to work this out as citizens of this community. We're very successful. We've accomplished a lot of great things. Let's do it together. Try to avoid the federal government, try to avoid their money, try to avoid their controls. And I know you have to back out of these things slowly. It can't just be done in a radical, fast movement. But don't you think that's really the direction we need to go? Please consider putting this on the ballot and try to make a way where the people of this community in this county are more involved in getting it designed, getting it built, getting it used, so that whatever's done here is not a federal program, it's our program. Can we do that? Thanks.
Thank you.
And I have great appreciation for you.
Thank you.
My name is Derek Button. I'm an Orem resident. I appreciate you hearing all of us again. I've spoken. I know many others have spoken before to this before. You appreciate the opportunity to again share our thoughts. I support BRT. My viewpoint is a long-term view. I am of the belief that a dollar invested in BRT now will move more people over the next 50 years than a dollar spent on a road. The long term, it's a better investment. Not that we need to stop investing in roads, but BRT will help with that. I'm on the Orem City Planning Commission. Recently, we traveled up to Salt Lake City, 400 South. We met with Salt Lake City folks, UTA folks, the University of Utah folks, talked about the impact, the benefit that the TRAX line along 400 South has been. They were up to 40,000 vehicle trips a day along 400 South, just as they implemented BRT or implemented TRAX. It has been pretty steady at 22,000 vehicle trips per day, with the rest of that absorbed by transit. The the long-term cost of tracks versus expanding that road ever wider to meet the transportation needs there. Tracks is definitely a worthwhile investment, and it will continue to pay dividends. I have my thoughts on where I'd like to see the BRT line run through Provo and Orem. Doesn't necessarily, I have different thoughts than what the current alignment is, but I've seen that the engineers have researched this and studied this based on the federal guidelines of what the federal government wants to see. The most riders, maximize the riders. They're looking for an efficient system, and they've studied it and they've determined that this is the best route. Provo City didn't think that was so, and they spent $100,000 or whatever to study it again, and again determined this is our best route. So to that, I leave that to the engineers to make that determination. As smart as I think I am coming to terms with the fact that they're probably smarter in these types of things. So support the BRT. I hope you will continue to support it. Let's put the money there and get our tax dollars back in Utah County, and it's a good long-term investment. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Abby Albrecht. I'm the director of the Utah Transportation Coalition, and I'll just take a minute of your time, but we are definitely in support of the BRT. It's a spoke, one of the spokes in our massive transportation system that we have. You know this, we're going to double in size in the next 25 years. And a lot of it's going to happen right here in Utah County. For those of you that have been talking about the federal dollars, we pay 18.5 cents of our gas tax to the federal government into the Highway Trust Fund. We are a donor state, depending on the time of year. That money is coming back. It's our money that we have put into the Highway Trust Fund is coming back for projects just like this one. So we are not taking more money necessarily from the federal government. We are getting back what we have already put into the system. We do all of our capacity projects here in the state on the state system as far as the DOT with state dollars. We maintain our system on federal dollars. This is how we use it for capacity in the UTA system. And I would highly encourage you to continue this process. Let it go through. Again, we're going to double in population. This has to be a spoke in the armor for our overall transportation system. We've spoke to many, many people, the MTC, all of the malls, the universities. This is going to be a very great advocate and system for those types of groups, and we would encourage you to continue the process.
Can I ask you a question? Are you under the opinion that the data that was collected to put this application forward is still valid?
As far as go into a little bit further detail for me, the data
that was collected from BYU and from the study on ridership and everything, you feel that it's still valid?
We're going off of their assumptions. We're not questioning what they're providing to us, either the universities or the MTC. We're taking their word at their word.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Whipple. I'm a Provo resident and I represent the Mazer neighborhood through the neighborhood program in North City. And we are very much in favor of the BRT program. We are a fairly low income neighborhood in the Pioneer District, and we have so many people who rely on public transportation, and our system's not robust enough to meet the needs that we have. We have people on wheelchairs who are struggling on curbs, who can't use the regular buses. They'll be able to use BRT. This is something that gives our children freedom to be able to go to UVU, where they have lots of activities for our high school kids. This helps our community, and I'm very much in support of it.
Can I ask you a question too?
Sure.
So I'm assuming that your neighborhood uses the bus system now.
Yes.
And if we
bus, walking, and front runner, because it's within walking distance of many of the houses in our neighborhood. Not all.
And so if we were theoretically in Provo, just to say Provo, double in size, equally across the whole thing, we went from 2,500 to 5,000 riders on that bus, do you think they'd be able to handle it, the current system?
The current system, no, and it doesn't do the accessibility issues for our people like mothers with strollers have a terrible time getting on and off of the regular buses. But with the BRT having the elevated platform, so it's a straight shot onto the bus, much more family friendly and wheelchair friendly.
But they are accessible for them to use.
The BRT
I mean,
is.
the current bus. They're ADA accessible.
Yeah, well, but if you're a woman with a stroller and an infant and a toddler, it's almost impossible to use a regular bus. As someone who's done this when my own children were little, you can't do your big regular stroller. It's better to do a collapsible umbrella, and then you're struggling with a toddler who's running away and holding an infant. And that's generally not where you get the special wheelchair lift. So the BRT would be really helpful for young families that we also had a lot of in our neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carlin, sorry, I have a cold. Carlin Gledhill, Provo. I just wanted to ask you to please put this to a vote. My family utilizes public transport on a regular basis. It's very underutilized what we have. My husband takes it at rush hour, the bus to the train. From BYU area, there's never more than 3 to 5 people on the bus during the rush hour time. And it's spending a whole lot of money on a system that we already have in place that could just be tweaked without spending, enormous amounts of money. People keep talking about how our population growth is going to double. We have a different culture here, and I love our culture in Utah. Okay, they keep comparing us to these places that are nothing like us. It is. Moms do not want to take their 4 kids on a bus to the grocery store. It doesn't meet our cultural needs. This is a poor plan. At least put it to a vote so we can slow this down or stop it. We have a system in place, and yes, it could be improved and it could be tweaked, but it doesn't need to be completely, this is like so over the top ridiculous to spend this money in this way. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Cameron Martin. I'm a citizen in Provo City, but also professionally, I work at Utah Valley University as Vice President for University Relations. Wanted to just quickly speak to some issues that are important to our institution, and that mainly is the increased frequency and reliability of east-west traffic flow. So our students can get into the heart of Orem, into the heart of Provo, and back out in that east-west traffic flow. And we're not trying to have UVU take an official position one way or the other, but this is very important to us to improve that and to build for that future. We note that there are a lot of our younger students who are, even in my neighborhood, anecdotally, and there's been a lot of anecdotal conversation here today. So I thought, what the heck, I'll add some. They don't go and get their driver's license till they're 18, 20 or so, because it's a different mindset. I applaud you for what you're trying to do to make sure we do the right things for the right ways. We support that wholeheartedly. But we also have to be careful that we're building for the future and a new mindset. The older generation is one, get in the car and drive. I'm part of that. And I need to be a little bit better in my stewardship in my community. And if the bus system was more quickly, was the rapid transit system, and I've used it in other major metropolitan areas and find it very reliable and easily accessed and usable. But where I'm at, I don't have that particular option as a personal opportunity. I do also want to just clarify one thing. There was some comment made earlier that these students come in and then they leave. That's not the case at UVU. 80% of our student body are from this area and stay and build this economy. Again, this is a younger generation that's building our community. We would ask that whatever the solution be, that we have to address, one, the ability to handle better east-west traffic flow, as well as the into and out of the heart of Provo City and Orem City, out to our campus in particular at UVU. That's an incredibly important issue for us. because that's where our students are coming in and out and how they're accessing our roads. It is also imperative as UVU grows that we can't add another 10,000 students without shutting down the infrastructure surrounding that institution. I-15 can easily become a parking lot every morning and afternoon because of the car traffic. So the BRT type solution allows us to augment that and extend the capacity, if you will, of our institution and access to that higher learning. Infrastructure is a key ingredient in us managing our future. So I applaud you. You're in a tough spot. Good luck. But it's never easy to do the right thing and look forward to the future and how to manage it when a lot of us are standing now just looking at the current situation. You're building for tomorrow, and we appreciate what you're doing and how you're doing it. Thank you.
Cameron, can I ask you a question, please, Commissioner? As my friend, hopefully will continue to be.
Oh, absolutely. It's great that we have differences.
Yes, it is.
It is, because then we're coming to a better
I
solution.
acknowledge that UVU has a unique situation, and rightfully so. There's a problem that and I'm sure my other fellow commissioners have actually taken the opportunity to ride that bus route 830. I've done it so that I can speak from seeing it, and I noticed that there is a concern that it will come up in the future for UVU students. That's where I see the activity.
Yeah.
When I brought the question up to the lady earlier about the modeling, the universities are different. UVU is a commuter college to a great respect. BYU is not. It's a destination college, and yet the data does not show, does not reflect. They have the ride now that does something different. UVU does not have the same thing. So my question is that as you look at this, I see there's a need.
Yes.
And do you think that the need could be fixed independently or with less money than what we're spending now?
Candidly, I don't feel like I'm in a position to make that kind of a judgment.
Okay.
I don't think I have the data in front of me, truly. I do know that UVU is one of the highest riderships of UTA, front runner in the bus system. And we're second only to the University of Utah in the state of Utah. So we depend upon mass transit significantly, and our dependence on that is going to grow exponentially, especially in the next 10 years as this county continues to grow. I wish I could make a judgment call on your question, but I don't feel I have. To be fair, I would be lifting my finger and sticking it in the wind, and I don't think that would be accurate.
Coming from your campus to front runner, there is definite need. I mean, I saw that when I was on that bus. I see that as it goes from your campus even down to maybe a point in Provo where they get off and maybe go to live. I see that.
Yeah,
I see
there's
that.
a lot of commingling of the student body into this heart of program. So that's why that's so important from our perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Frank.
Thank you.
Larry Ballard, Utah County. Just a quick comment on federal funding. Back in the 70s or 80s, when federal revenue sharing first began taking wings, there was a great public outcry of sending our tax dollars to the federal government and then getting it back, because they end up rolling through the bureaucracy. Now, a couple of months ago, I was speaking with a representative from Mountain Association of Governments, and the indication to me was, as MAG is getting its money, that number one, it comes back to worth about 20 cents on the dollar. So our $1 that comes out of our tax dollars to the federal government comes back to us in ways of transportation money at about 20 cents. Understanding that this commission is not going to solve that, but it needs to be part of the mix.
If they'd let us, we might try.
What's that?
I say if they would let us, we might try.
Yes, I understand that. And the other part that I'd like to mention is it said, whereas there used to be a board and there used to be more openness and transparency in how the monies were going to come to Mountain Land Association, now there is one bureaucrat. So I'm suggesting that, understanding you can't solve this, but we all need to be aware that we're not getting dollar for dollar back what we give to the federal government. We're getting 20 cents on the dollar, and those monies are being shut down and controlled more and more and more all the time. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I can't see as they're lying.
No, you're first in line.
They're waiting you.
I'm Hans Anderson, Orange City. I wanted to make some comments about this. First thing I'd like to point out, which has been said before, is BRT is a government program. It's socialism. In Orange City, we have what we call Utopia, where the city council got together and unanimously for 10 years voted thinking they could do better than private enterprise. It didn't. They thought they could do better than it. You heard of iProvo. Fortunately, private enterprise came in and bought off their albatross. Government cannot run it. It doesn't know how to run it. It's tried. And to me, this BRT thing is nothing but an expansion of another socialist program like those, where government said we can outsmart private enterprise. It can't do it. It does not work. It's like asking a steer to reproduce. It's just not going to happen. It can't happen. And I wish somebody would come and bail out our city. Now, your numbers, which Andrew Jackson gave, he said the BRT system, Utopia, or I get mixed up my socialist programs here. But anyway, BRT, Frontrunner, the whole bunch of them, pays 15% of its own way. 15%, box fare. That is a socialist program. Now that's your number, not mine. What I'm saying is, if you're going to do something like this, why don't you let the people vote on it? It's a loser. Let the people at least step in the trough, let them decide it. We had an election here and thinking, well, I wanted people to have a chance to vote on this. They thought they voted on it when we had the county elections. We didn't, but I'd like to ask, what is the compelling deadline to hold this hearing today? Can we vote against and do a referendum after the May 12th hearing? You mentioned there's going to be a May 12th hearing. Can we start a referendum after that? Or does it have to be, if you vote for this today, is this when it has to be done?
It starts today.
It's today. It's not May 12th. But what's the May 12th hearing for then?
It's for people to come and give input into it. This is not, this is a parameters resolution which sets the outside parameters of what might happen. The public hearing is part of that process in getting to finality.
So May 12th would just say, here's what we've already agreed to do, and you can still talk about it then. It doesn't.
You may view it that way.
Yeah. Well, let me encourage you to let the citizens vote on this. Let us have a chance to vote on this. We thought we voted on it once. The representatives, whether you want to call it the majority or the 2/3, they thought they voted on this already.
That was not the citizenry, however.
Yeah, I know it was people elected by the citizenry.
As are we.
Who chose candidates. Right. And that's part of the angst about this whole thing, is they thought they had something in place. People can change their minds. I've done it. But if we're going to change our minds, let's let the people vote on it. Is there, what's the compelling reason that this can't be put off for a month?
At some point in time, we need to move forward. This has been stated here. This is
the compelling reason. What deadline is coming up that says this has to be handled today?
So that we can continue our work with Federal Transit Administration to finalize the funding for that.
Well, what's the deadline for the budget? When would this have to be voted on to get it in the budget?
It's already in the federal budget.
I'm talking about the county.
It won't be in our budget.
Our bond is going to be in our budget.
It's not a GO bond. It is not an obligation of the people of this county. It's a special, we call it here, it's a special obligation revenue bond, which is already funded by current taxes, not a new tax, and it's obligated only by that source. Well, if it was something else, then it would require a vote of the people. This does not.
Well, from my reading, you're gonna take taxpayers' money, which ought to go for roads, and spend it on BRT, whether you say it's already set aside, it's already an existing.
May I?
Pardon?
What does BRT drive on? They are fixing the roads at the same time. Don't forget, it's a combination project. So it is roads and transit. It's not just.
Well, it sounds to me like we're saying we have a debt, we don't really have a debt. Let's let the people vote on that too. But is there a compelling reason to do it right now? Why not put it off a month? That's what I'm asking. Is there a deadline right now for the budget? When do you have to have the stuff for the budget?
That's beside the point, Hans.
No, I don't think it is.
It is.
Okay, well, thank
But
you.
let me suggest or answer a question. This money, you're saying it's for roads, and it will be used on roads. The money that we're using for VRP will come back at a later date for use on roads, and it will be paid with monies that are transit dedicated. That's part of the interlocal agreement that's in place. I think that's some of what people are missing on this.
The money's coming from the people of Utah County that we as a people voted with the majority.
And it's not.
4 times to put on the ballot. Once we voted to have UTA be a part of our county, then 3/4 sales. That's the other part.
There's no
But
new
we the
tax.
people did do it.
There's no new
Some
tax.
of you did it before I was allowed to vote, so I can't be blamed for all of it.
Okay, are there other comments?
A lot of discussion on this.
My name is Janet Wells Woodward. I live in Salem. I first came to Utah about 40 some odd years ago to BYU. I keep hearing the county's going to double in size. I mean, it's a whole lot bigger than it was when I first came here. But most of that growth is not in the middle of Provo. Not residential anyway. I know the BYU campus that used to be quite a parking lot is no longer that. It has now been replaced with buildings that will educate students. I believe that a lot of, as I look at the proposed route for BRT, you have BYU, you have UVU, and you have the mall. And yes, you'll have some neighborhoods along that way, but for the most part, it's a very limited usership that you're focusing on. As I said, I live in Salem. We've got maybe 6,000 people, and that maybe if you count some of the cows. We're just different, you know, and we're fighting on the south end of this county not to be sucked into things that are happening on the north end of the county. We want desperately to keep the way of life that we have had for years and years and years. We aren't the same. Utah County is not a homogeneous group. I understand public transportation because I was born in Philadelphia and raised on the outskirts of Boston. I rode buses, I rode trains, I rode the subway. I took a bus that was maybe a quarter mile from my house to the train station that was a mile from my house to ride into Boston that was 9 miles from my house. And I did that as a youth. I understand transportation. I'm not enamored with UTA. I don't think that they're a responsible body. And I think a lot of the news and the facts have borne that out. If we're going to partner with somebody, perhaps we need to partner with somebody that's true private and has to be responsible for making a profit. This is a subsidized system. If we're going to take dollars that have already been spent or are in our coffers, we need to spend them wisely on things that will benefit most of the people. I don't know if it needs to go to a referendum. Some of the information that I've heard here today perhaps points that it doesn't need to. But then that leaves it squarely on the shoulders of 3 men sitting in front of me. We need to make sure that they spend wisely the dollars that are collected.
Thank you. Okay, we've had a fair discussion, I think, this morning, and I'm not saying others. So we will move.
Oh, one more.
Excuse me, we have one more.
You know, I really hope I come to this today because I don't look as nice as I think I do. I thought, you know, I think I will.
I think you look better.
I wish
But you do
I.
need to state your name for us.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes, even though you might know. RG Shumway, and I feel like I have 3 pins up there. I think you're wonderful. And we can disagree. I was sitting there thinking, I wonder how many of us are controlled in our decision-making by greed, pride, self-serving, and how many of us are controlled by how much we buy into the socialistic philosophy of government, and how many of us are really grounded in what it means to be a republic, and how many of us really agree that we are truly conservatives and that we believe in the free enterprise. Now, my question is to our commissioners, of which I have somewhat of an understanding because I happen to just stumbled onto a wonderful free enterprise system that is serving the BYU campus right now called RIDE. How many of you know about that? Do you know about the wonderful, successful?
I've asked Provo City for a $2 million subsidy this last year, by the way. That light did ask Provo City for subsidy because they're not making money.
They told me something differently.
So.
That they are trying to, at this point, they are thinking about, and part of their program is to buy more buses. So I would challenge right now you to check into what private industry is doing, or private industry, with our bus system, what's already happening. Have you done this, Mr. Lee? Have you checked with RIDE and talked to it? And have you, Larry? And have you talked to RIDE? Mr. Gray? Well, it is
We've heard a little bit about it.
Right. And I think that it is something we should look into and see how it's working, because it is a free enterprise system that I am told is working. Now, they could have been telling me wrong. They could have been, that old lady, she told me to tell her that. But I have 2 BYU grandsons living with us. And one day I said, take the bus. Grandma, we can walk. We are returned missionaries. We can walk to BYU or take our bikes. They bike and they walk to BYU. And so that's another thing. If we had time to really examine these kids, what the need is on the campus there. And is the campus really taking care of itself? Anyway, I don't know, but I think we should check it out.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your comments. We'll move on into our agenda. We have several items on our consent agenda, not the largest consent agenda, but I would suggest that we continue item number 2. It was originally planning to be on the 28th, and I think the auditor indicated that there's some questions. Continue to the 28th, and that we continue item number 5. That's the one that we continued last week. I had a conversation with Scott and we will get corrected information on for our next agenda on the items of question last week. Question number 4. Let's see here.
Could you all make sure you please sign the rolls before you leave?
I have just a comment on number 4. You have questions 3 wants to pull 4? Yes, okay, we'll pull 4. on the minutes, I just have one real quick issue. And, well, just note this, Renee, it's in the second paragraph or the third line, the last word. Third line, word collector. Collection.
And thank you, Renee, for saying that. I was able to read it over last night. So thank you.
It's that's the designation of a road, of that particular type of road collection. Okay. And then moving into the regular agenda. I would suggest we move items 2 through 4 to consent. Pardon? I don't think that. Item 6. With the understanding that we need to find a couple $1,000 in order to fund that business. Item 8.
Are you saying these two go to consent? Okay.
Oh, no, holy man, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to slip that line. Okay, any objection to those? No. Oh.
Sorry, I just want to make sure with that. Consent agenda item numbers 2 and 5 to continue for 1 week. Consent agenda item number 4 pulled to regular agenda for discussion.
Right.
And then regular agenda item numbers 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9 move to consent.
Yeah. Okay, with that then, let's go back to consent agenda item number 4, if we could, Commissioner Lee.
This is just a question for Dave on there. The word in there, I'm okay with the erroneous, but I'm concerned about the illegal word. Is there a way that we can strike that and just say erroneous?
We could, if in this case, we find that to be accurate.
So are we saying that what was done was illegal? I mean, that's my concern.
Is that part of the statute that addresses these, it's one or the other, is the reason why we can do this?
The statute says, yes, erroneous or illegal.
So we're just pointing them right out of the statute. Okay, it just makes me nervous when I see illegal. And as we're.
That's why I smile, I think that's the same question in years past, but yes.
Okay, I'll probably ask that again as it comes up, because every time I read that, it just seems like we're opening ourselves up.
It's not illegal in the nature of a criminal provision, but it's only illegal in that it would not be a lawful tax. So to that extent, that's the background behind it.
All right, as long as you're comfortable. At least I don't have to defend it.
He was concerned about who was going to jail because it was illegal.
Yeah. I want to be on record stating that I was concerned about that.
I think it's the vice chair that does that.
Oh, yeah. I'm responsible to you. Yeah, right.
Renee, I meant to just mention this to you on item number 4 on the agenda. Just notice on that and make note, we need to update it. It still shows Robert Kirk as the department manager on some of those agenda items. So if you just double check those, and there may be others. That's just the one again that I happened to notice. Okay. With that, then we'll go to item number 1 on the regular agenda.
Do we need a motion since we moved that to the regular agenda? So I will say I move to approve consent agenda item number 4.
I second. It was just a comment. Oh, excuse me. Yes, we did. Consent agenda item number 4 was discussed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Okay. I'm looking for your fellow partner in, I was gonna say crime, but based on Commissioner Lee's earlier discussions, I'm not gonna say that. Or Richard. I don't see Richard here. I just had a question. Now, I think Rollins had a discussion with him last week in the personnel session.
Yes.
We did. Are there any issues unresolved in that? I recognize we did not vote. This is what we're doing here. But I was not privy to that discussion, have not had a chance to talk to Richard about this specifically.
We asked to clarify for budgeting to make sure, and everything, as I recall, said it was all good.
Yeah, this is basically the same cost.
And I didn't see a comment from our auditor that said otherwise.
Is there a problem if I ask for this to be continued so I can talk with Richard specifically? Is there something that's driving this?
They're anxious to get the positions open, and so we can't really do that until they're in staffing.
Well, I thought weren't we doing some doubling up as well, so that there is a time.
Right, they're anxious to get somebody in the one slot before.
I have a vacancy right now.
One vacancy and one announced retirement, and so they want.
Let me just suggest this, and I'm assuming that there will be a motion to approve this or to authorize this change. I don't know if there is. If there isn't, and we go the other way, and it would be plenty of time to talk to him. Going forward, I would just ask if I have to make a quick call to him and have that discussion before we post it and move forward.
I think that we should move it next week then if we're gonna do that, but I'm willing to move forward now.
Well, that's what I'm
saying. Table it, and I'll see if I can get it.
So are we saying if I make a motion to approve this with the understanding that we allow Commissioner Ellerson till the end of business today to make that call?
All I'm saying is go ahead and move it forward with the understanding that it's my conversation. I don't anticipate it will. With him cause to do something different, he will be contacting you and we'll come back onto a future agenda to change what we just did. Okay, so I'm saying move it forward with the understanding that I just had a quick conversation. I don't anticipate any change.
Okay, then I motion to authorize, the following staffing plan changes as mentioned in regular agenda item 1.
Second. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for the motion and the second. We do have a motion and a second to authorize regular agenda item number 1 was discussed. All in favor, say aye. 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 Motion carries 3-0. Okay, I think we pulled that out.
Yeah.
No, how did you want it? I'm okay either way. Just do it. However, that's okay. All right. Okay, number 5. Usually I would not have much question on this, but as I looked at the information that I had on this, the thing I did not have was the declaration letter from the VA stating what the disability is.
You do now.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate this. However, on the application, you misstated the percentage.
No, at the bottom, see the total combined.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at above here. So they're additive. That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Okay, we're good then. I've seen what I need to see. So we would need a finding if you're so inclined to make a motion that we would approve this. I think this is one of those where it's the first time and it was something you were aware of prior. And if if you'll notice that in the last line of the item on the agenda down on there, Dave has actually put the wording in there for us.
I move that we approve regular agenda item with the finding that failure of the claimant to timely file the application was beyond the claimant's reasonable control and not to extend the deadline would be against equity or good conscience. Oh, that flows well when I can read it.
And I will second that. We have a motion and a second that we approve the late veteran abatement contained in item 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Thank you. All right, we are now into item number 10. Is that correct? Yes. Yes, it is. We are okay. This is relative to considering the adoption of a resolution relative to the authorizing issuance for sale of bonds as we've talked about in the past, but today is really the discussion about those. Matt, would you like to come and give us an overview of what we're doing here, please? Matt, excuse me, you'll introduce yourself, but he's our financial advisor.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps due to potential questions, also like to invite Randy Larson.
That would be fine.
Council,
We're pleased that
answer questions as they come
we're
up.
pleased that we've made it so he can hear with us this morning.
Thank you. Commissioners, the resolution before you contemplates the issuance of subordinated transportation sales tax revenue bonds.
Which means?
Matt Dugdale, financial advisor to the county. And this is the first legal required step when you are contemplating the issuance of bonds, and sets forth certain requirements that you have to meet. For example, the public hearing, which has been discussed. A little bit about the resolution in and of itself.
Pardon me, man, I'm sorry. On the subordinated, that was what I was asking you
Sure.
to just clarify what that means, if you would, please.
Sure. So the county has bonds outstanding currently that have what we call a senior lien pledge on the transportation sales tax revenues. And by virtue of this being designated as a subordinated bond, those bonds that are senior get priority. For example, if the first dollar that comes in, those first dollars go and pay the debt service on those senior lien bonds. When you're dealing with a subordinated bond, once the senior lien has been met from a debt service perspective, then you go and pay the debt service on these subordinated bonds. So,
and these are sold with the understanding that that's the sole source of repayment?
That is correct. This is fully disclosed to investors. They understand what a senior lien is, what a subordinated lien is, and they essentially pay you based on that, their assessment of this credit risk and your credit profile. The parameters itself sets forth a maximum box within which the bonds would have to fit. So we set forth a maximum par amount, principal amount, a maximum interest rate, a maximum term, and by virtue of this resolution, you then designate to designated officers the ability to ensure that those parameters have been met and not exceeded. If they are exceeded, then well, they cannot exceed the parameters without further action from the commission. As well, the resolution mentions the interlocal agreement. I'm happy to answer questions on that. Perhaps I may give Randy the microphone to address more legal aspects of the resolution. Do you have anything to add?
Randy Larson with Ballard Star, Council to the county. Matt did great. The only thing I would note is that this is a authorization of documents that, assuming those parameters can be met, this is the legislative action of the county to approve those bond documents, assuming a successful closing within the parameters. I would note that it does not bind the county to issue bonds. You reserve the right as a county commission to revoke that authorization anytime, all until the day the bonds are issued. Absent that, however, the bonds may be issued with the sign-off of the designated officer. There are draft forms of the documents available for residents to be able to, or citizens to be able to come and review the significant legal terms for the documents. Those will be put on file, and it's a standard form that we've used in the past for issuing bonds, minus the subordinated pledge that Matt described.
Okay.
Thank you. If I can, Mr. Chair, if I can address them. Thank you for, and I've had multiple phone calls with you over the last day or so. Thank you for the information that you've given to me. A couple questions. One, can this bond resolution that we're doing now actually be put off to some time in the future and still meet the requirements that we're looking to accomplish by issuing the bond?
I'll take that. The timing for this resolution is completely up to the commission. Whatever you feel is appropriate timing wise. As far as logistics and working within the bounds of the interlocal agreement, I'm assuming that would just be under consideration, but the timing, generally from the date that you adopt a resolution until bonds are issued, we generally look at about a 2-month window, which can be contracted or protracted as you see fit. So it really time is up to you.
So the question that comes up over and over, and I'm sure we're going to have lots of multiple discussion on this as we go forward. I found out that this resolution was coming on our agenda Thursday night, Friday, about the same time that the public saw it, which is fine. I mean, any commissioner can put something on the agenda. The question usually comes up, not can we, but should we do this? With this being such a large issue in our county and with multiple opinions on this, would it seem prudent or reasonable that there be given more time for the public at large to look over what we're actually trying to accomplish here, knowing that this action right now actually triggers and starts processes that they go forward. And as I've talked with Dave, our attorney here, the concern is that by short-circuiting this or preloading this into the equation, it doesn't give the people an opportunity actually, because they're under the assumption that this was not going to trigger until the actual monies from DC have been voted on, at least by the House and the Senate, which has not taken place. And so it feels like a preload to an issue, maybe and hopefully not, but to sum it up, I've listened to as a way of short-circuiting the people to organize efficiently. And I hope that all of us as commissioners are sensitive to the people in this county, and would like to give them every opportunity to voice their opinion, even if it's through a referendum process. And so do you feel any sense that this is a little bit of a preload to short circuit? Or does it seem like we could postpone this down the road a ways? Whatever that is, I don't know. It could be discussed.
I don't know that that's really.
Maybe I could just.
I was gonna say, I don't know that that's an appropriate question for these two. I think that is the question for us, because Matt is our finance advisor and legal counsel for that, not to relay the sentiment of the public, or should we? That's why they elect us to make this decision. I think that's the discussion that we're having.
Okay, maybe I could change those then. Have you seen this financial advisor in doing this in the past, where federal dollars have come into play, and it is done before the actual knowing of the federal dollars? This resolution. Have you seen this before? Has this been done before, or have you seen this before?
I have seen issuers begin the process of issuing bonds prior to the source of funding become available. I wouldn't say it's relatively common, but I would say it's not.
So it has happened.
Okay. It certainly has happened. The intent usually is to have simultaneous tracks. You clearly wouldn't issue your bond without having that. That probably seems, that's not necessarily a question I should answer, but I would be fair to say I think that seems improved to issue bonds until the source of repayment is entitled. But it is relatively common to begin the funding process where you're also engaged in the funding source, so that those two tracks can come together because there are certain legal processes that have to occur prior to issuing bonds that may make sense to happen at the simultaneous as you're searching for the fund. But clearly that is a policy decision, not a legal one. If you're asking me if it's been done before, yes.
It's not common, okay. Clever enough. He said it's not on. Yes, but at least. I'm sorry. Playing awkward. Yeah. To that end, let me just add a little bit of information. This issue is not a new issue. This issue has been around for years in terms of the BRT, and the discussion has been actively discussed in the city. It's been before the MAG regional planning group over the last year plus, and has come to us. We're not making this unilaterally. This is a decision that has come to us, and we recommend that you move forward in this process of funding the BRT project. That's what has happened. Who's we? The MAG process.
That would be every city planner and engineer. It would be all the mayors. It would be in conjunction with UTA, UDOT, and the Utah Transportation Coalition.
That's semi-inaccurate, but
well, that's who participated in it, are those people.
Those who show up to participated. And I would suggest that if you were to look for a percentage, you probably have a very high percentage of the population represented in those that showed up. Nonetheless, I'm not debating that issue. So to that end, it has come to us with a recommendation that we move forward, and that's the process that we're involved in. In conjunction with that, the process has always been tied to obtaining some of our money coming back from the federal government and being used on this project. There's a couple of things that have happened. It was included in the president's budget. We have received through the environmental review process a finding of no significant interest, which basically says they've reviewed the engineering, they've reviewed the project, and have said this is a good project, you can move forward with it. And then just the past week, I had a communication from the deputy director of the Federal Transit Administration. Have I got the title correct on that? Yes. It's stating that basically they're waiting for us to do something that shows them that we're committed to moving forward on it, so that they then will make the final commitment that you are asking for to enter into a full funding grant agreement. So that's what we're moving forward at this point in time.
You know, and maybe to that point, I find that interesting because as you step through those processes, and I don't know what Commissioner Graves knows or not, but I was not involved in any single one of those conversations. And so it seems to be driven without communication to a point to where I received a notification basically the same time the public did.
Bill, let me ask you though, the thing that has come back to us, that there's already movements afoot relative to organizing for a referendum. I think this has been known, generally speaking, for some time.
Well, I don't, I mean,
so I'm not going to argue the words saying that I don't think this is new information to anyone, other than the fact that we were moving it ahead to the agenda, which was basically saying we put it out there, we put it in the agenda process. Anyway,
I think it's just unfortunate that we don't have a communication loop that allows, you know, especially on decisions, even if we disagree, you know, to the point to where we can communicate and say this is kind of the intent and this is what's going on, so that we have a heads up. You know, to the point of the public, you know, starting. Yeah, lots of talk. There's always talk out there, but actually putting formulation and plans in place, the public, as I read them and have talked with them, they were under the impression that until Congress acts, because to put it in the president's budget,
That's
is
still the
only,
case.
if I could just finish my thought, if Congress, you know, Congress needs to act on this, just because it's in the president's budget does not necessarily mean, I mean, the president's budget's been used for doorstops in the past because it doesn't do anything. So it's Congress that actually needs to, the House needs to start this process.
Jamie, come on up.
So can I
Will you walk
answer
us
this
through
through
the federal process?
because just going back, so I have an input on that too. I wasn't told before Thursday or Friday. It doesn't bother me because I'm not told necessarily anything that we put on unless it's in my portfolio. But that being said, if this was an attempt, and I've been accused and I've had people literally say, well, you don't want public input. If this was an attempt to hide from the public, you can't even argue the fact that we would have waited. This was a collaboration between Larry and I to hide it from the public. And this thing would have, no, I know you didn't say that. I'm saying others have said that to me. Then this thing would have not been on this agenda. What wouldn't have been talked about would be on next week after the convention so that all the Republican Party can be told about it. I mean, that's the funny thing. When we talk about good conspiracies, let's really get to the heart of the conspiracy and put some rational thought to it. You know, it wasn't an attempt to hide, and I would contend the fact that we had a convention that happened to have conversation alerted the public, and so now we do have a great opportunity for public comment.
But you're fine with everyone knowing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Everybody should know.
There was no secret. It wasn't intended to be secret. Well, okay. Now, if you don't want to go down that path, no. Well, we had a discussion about secret conversations and those kinds of things. So, Jamie, will you?
No, don't hide from it.
I'm not hiding from it. I just
don't state it.
Jamie, will you?
It's like an accusation of some sort.
Well,
I'll introduce myself and
please.
if you have any questions, I'm happy to
Please.
answer them. I'm Jamie Blakesley. I'm the new general counsel of the Utah Transit Authority. And just by way of introduction, I spent the first 10 years of my career at the Federal Transit Administration in Washington, D.C. Last year in Portland, Oregon, working for TriMet, now here at UT. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm just wondering if can you clarify what the process is from UTA/Utah, not Utah, UTA FTA.
Sure. So the Federal Transit Administration has several different grant programs that are used by entities all throughout the country to fund transit projects and capital investments. Most of them are formula in nature, and so they come based on population and other needs. The funds that are being sought for this project are competitive in nature. It's a discretionary program. It's called the Small Starts Program. It's dramatically oversubscribed, and so there is a long waiting period to receive the funds, and there's a competitive process to advance your project and move forward. And so I think when we're speaking about timing, one of the important aspects of the timing is recognizing that we have been in line for a long time to receive the funds, and we want to move the bond action and the grant action together concurrently so that you don't lose time on the construction of the project. As with any federal program, these programs are subject to federal appropriations, and those appropriations happen periodically. They're typically renewed as they expire. And so we have every expectation that as we enter into this grant agreement, that the federal agency will have the funds to contribute to the project. And when they make that commitment, it will be subject, as with any federal investment, to federal appropriations.
When does the transportation bill expire?
The current authorization. So you have two actions that are before Congress. One is an appropriations action, the other is an authorization action. Current authorization is set to expire in May. It has been set to expire at varying points over the past few years. And at each time, there's been a continuing resolution to allow it to move forward. My expectation is that there will be a similar action taken this time around.
So it looks like it's going to go on a continuing resolution. And in May, it looks like they're going to start to formulate committees and run down through and talk about transportation needs.
That's the typical process.
Right. Okay. And they'll, so, you know, I hopefully we have an opportunity, thank you, you know, to work through all the way through questions and concerns, you know, before we move to a motion. Hopefully that's the intent. Well, I have a bunch of questions and concerns I'd like to ask you. The first one is that, you know, we talk about this all the time, and I don't. Now, first, I want to put it out here. I am not against mass transit. That's not my intent. my intent here is to demonstrate and to show that I think we have a priority problem when we're looking at funding projects of this magnitude. So for instance, our first quarter cent sales tax goes 100% to UTA. Our second quarter cent sales tax, 92% goes to UTA with 8% that goes to roads. And anytime I look at those kind of funding sources, wherever we invest, if we invest our time in our family, then we have a certain expectation that that's where our priority is. If we invest in our time, in work, wherever. So as a county, with those two funding sources, obviously we can see that we have a heavily investment when it comes to UTA and UTA projects. This third quarter cent sales tax that we're talking about right now, which has been changed over time to break the silos down so they can be used as the most flexible third quarter cent sales tax probably in the state. Would you probably agree with that? Anyway, nevertheless, it's the one that we're looking at right now to fund the revenue source bonding for the BRT project. And yet, when we're looking at those sources of funding to do this, it is a heavily weighted, where's our priorities when we're looking at these funding sources. And we saw the fight that went on up there in the state legislature when it came to what's going on with our roads and road construction and projects throughout the entire state. And Utah County is not exempt from that. We have that as well, but according to those three, it looks like 8% of one of the quarter cent sales taxes, all we're going to allocate that direction. And I said this before, and I'll say it again, that government tends to want to fill up the buckets. And as they fill up the buckets, then they reach back out and ask for more money. And we saw this play itself out with the county option sales tax that is now possibly before us that will be taken to the people, because we'll have to go for a fourth quarter cent sales tax. The people's going to have to vote on it, but the breakdown on it is 40% UTA, 40% cities and towns, and 20% county. Again, a heavy side, approximately $7.5 million on the UTA side. And so where we put our money is where we're going to have our priorities. And I think that we're overly leveraged to one side, potentially with this third quarter cent sales tax taking us out 20 years. I mean, in the parameters, I know what parameters are. They're just building a box. It says in the parameters potentially 32 years. I'm not going to try to push that. I know where we're at there with the 20 and even less potentially. But nevertheless, that's where we're going. And so it might be that if we were to pull back and say, maybe as a county, maybe we need to put more into roads, into our city roads, into our county structure. If we do that and the BRT project does not go forward, would we even need to raise taxes for a fourth quarter cent sales tax? Because we could allocate those monies back then to the cities and help the cities with a lot more of a quarter cent sales tax than a 20% or a 40%. And I think those are the things that are going through my mind as I'm trying to see where the allocation of these monies go. If UTA gets right now 100% of the one, 92 of the other, if it was a project that was on their radar as a very needed project that met all their guidelines, then with the money that they get from us in this county, if it was one of their top priorities, then why don't they just pay for it out of that money that we already give to them as a priority, saying this is the issue that is at hand? Those are the things that run through my mind. I have 4 areas that.
Can I comment on that?
Oh, sure.
Quick? I don't disagree with you that the majority of tax dollars, that's inarguable. But the problem is from the sources of sales taxes.
Right.
But the problem with that is that every time it was on the ballot and we, the people, spoke loudly as a majority and allowed it to go there every time. So when we say take a step back, we did this. It wasn't thrust upon us. Before I was born, the citizens voted and wanted UTA to be a part of it. And then the citizens voted before I was of voting age to give them the first quarter cent to fund it. And then when I could finally vote, and I don't remember how I voted, But we had a second option to fund mass transit. So overwhelmingly, they have continued to get it. You're right, it has been, but that's also been from the people. So as we move forward, we have to understand that 70% of the people voted for that. Now, has it changed? It may have. It really may have. But every time that these have been before the people, every time, there's not a case where one of these issues have gone against UTA or failed in mass transit in this county, not one time. That's the problem. We sit here and say, oh, the majority is against it. How can we say that literally when there is no substantial proof other than we've had some discussion with the Republican Party, and we assume that 1,500 delegates are all against it, as much in support as against, but we assume that we speak for everybody when we're in that party. And so it's a dangerous road for us to sit here and say, we know what everybody says. So certainly we kind of got to look at, and it's right, it's hard because there is a major group of people that are definitely opposed to BRT. That doesn't make them the majority of the public. And that's, that's the problem. Their voice needs to be heard. That's what we're here for. So even as we vote 2-1, that would accurately reflect what the county did in their last vote as a 70 to 30% vote. And that would accurately reflect the people. So we are in essence enacting the people's will if that were how it were to go. So that, that to me is kind of some of the things that has been drowned out in everything, plus I mean, to sit here and say, oh, well, yeah, UTA is not a state-run organization. It is counties, except a couple counties is all that does it. But this process, I've heard Mayor Curtis accused, well, he wants it to line his pockets, or Mayor Brunts does. The irony is neither of those were the two mayors when this process started. We've had Mayor Billings come in here on public comment in January and say, I started this when I was mayor. I had a different route. But here we are blaming the wrong people and accusing people of all these things when it's just not true. And that's the problem. We need to stick to facts. Is there a better way? There may be. I'm not smart enough to know. I do trust the city engineers and planners. I trust the mayors because they're elected by their representatives. I do trust that people like UT, when they get tax dollars, will be reviewed. Do they make mistakes? Yes. There is no doubt they do, but we don't make mistakes. So why would we hold them to a standard that we ourselves don't live? And that's kind of my issue with it. So.
Another question? Yes, I do. I have actually a few more. And thank you, Greg. I mean,
No, Greg's fine.
I don't want to, anyway. And a lot of the things that you said there, I think we're spot on with in the sense of where we're trying to accomplish. And I just wanted to bring up this vote in 2006. I mean, to me, it seems like a lifetime ago, back in 2006, that vote was taking place. It was asked, about mass transit in general, not specific. Most of the people thought it was more in line towards a front runner. I mean, sure. I think generally that's what the sentiment of the thinking was. During that time, or from there till now, there has been there's been discussion back and forth, even to the point of in 2014 when you and I both ran. This issue came up, and it came up not as necessarily the number one issue. It was the number one issue for some, but I probably put it in the top 5. I don't know if that's fair enough, but at least in the top 5. And as I ran down through it, it was pretty obvious to me that the delegates that basically got you elected, and the delegates plus the mass group out there, that was one of the issues in which they spoke pretty directly to me on in the sense of where do you stand and how are you going to go forward. So I would submit that there is differing views to the point to where it's not as black and white as it seems to be painted. And that's why I think as a commission, it would be to our advantage to allow or to find a way for the citizens to settle this issue once and for all. And I don't think we should be afraid of that. We shouldn't be afraid of the citizens speaking once and for all on what we think mass transit should be like in in this county. And and believe me, if they say, I'm all for it, I'm all in, I'll be there with UTA if they'll invite me to take a shovel and start the first dig and get it going. But if they were to say, hang on, I think we need to reprioritize a little bit, maybe we should look at roads a little more heavily instead of going this direction, then I think we should be willing to at least allow the people to weigh in. And from our conversations, I've heard you say, and I'm not trying to misrepresent, so please, Commissioner Graves, jump in. You know, you said that you're willing or in favor of the referendum for it to actually go on the ballot.
I support all referendums because that is the will of the people and that's the process. And I think it's important. If they have the clear majorities they think they do, it should be very easy. And I support all those movements because it gives me a chance to stand up here again. And I'm not afraid to say it. I'm strong. I've done that before. I'll do it again. But
fair enough. So I did speak with our council and with bond council. I've got 4 areas that I'm in. Some of them, they're my, one's my dream area, which is I know it's not going to happen, but I'll state them. I'll state them all. I think the first is, we could vote today on these this resolution. I will be voting no on it, and it could pass, and then go forward, and starting the referendum process, and whatever happens from there happens from there. The second one is that we could strike this from the agenda until we get down the road a little ways, in what I think is a possible averting of a lawsuit, potentially, as I've talked with Dave, where the courts have ruled in favor of those individuals who are seeking referendums where they feel like they might have been kind of short-sighted a little bit or preloaded. But anyway, that's the second one. The third one that I'd really like to explore is finding a balance, a compromise. I understand on this third one that there is, and I agree, we have under contract, there is an obligation. There's obligations under the contract to fulfill. There's potential liability if UTA was to decide to uphold that contract and say we're going to force you into the bond process. And I get that, and I think we've talked a little bit about that. And what I'd like to propose we look at is potentially finding a way, and that we pass this through as a bond resolution. And I would even be in favor of voting for this bond resolution with the caveat that we as a commission put it on the ballot to be ratified by the people. And that's an opportunity, I think, maybe, and it may take, we may have to just say, hold on that, and we'll have to work it over a little bit and think about it. And then the fourth one, of course, would be that the majority of the commission vote no on the resolution, and that this bonding process fails. Obviously, that one's going to be struck off. I think the other 3 are in place, but I'd sure like to talk about, especially number 3, on voting for the bond, but putting in there that it'll be ratified through a general election process in which the public get a chance to vote. Okay. Yeah, it's a conversation question.
To some of them, may I take the opportunity to speak a little bit? We talk about the fact that the majority of the monies that come from these quarter cents have been used for UTA and transit. I think we need to go back and understand that the second quarter, the first several years that it was in place, 100% of it went to roads, not to transit. We use it here in this county to build roads. UTA basically allowed that money to come to us to build roads. And then it was repaid and is being repaid by us. What's happening right now is, and we talk about the fact that the third quarter is what's financing this. Let me make it clear that that's a temporary financing. Ultimately, the bottom line is that this will be paid from the first quarter transit tax. The monies will come back to us and they will be used for roads. Just as the money that was to be used for transit came to us and be used for roads, now it's going back to transit. This is just the other side of that issue. And ultimately, this money will be used for roads. It will be a forced savings account for us so that we will have it in the future when we need to build some of those roads. In the meantime, we've heard from the planners of transportation that we will have, I don't remember the exact number, but several millions of dollars each year to continue road projects during the time that we're utilizing this to pay the bonds for the BRT project. So I guess I view it a little bit differently. I don't view that we're taking road money to buy transit. Just as, because we have had more than our share of what was allotted for roads to this point in time. I think people need to understand that. This isn't lost money. It's not a new source of taxes. It's already being collected. All we're doing is prioritizing it so that we can get in a timely manner the federal monies that we pay to them that come back to us that can be utilized on this project. And if we don't act now, we may lose it. Now, I know that irritates some and they say, well, fine, we don't want federal money. It's our money. We ought to use it to our benefit. Plain and simple. I understand some disagree with that. So anyway, I think the issue is that at some point in time, we've got to move this project forward. We can't continue to kick it down the road and just say, well, let's do this, let's do that. I think it's a timely project. It has come to us. It's been recommended last year that we move forward with it. We've delayed moving forward. Things have aligned now, which say it's probably time that we move it forward.
I wonder if I could just address a couple of those questions there. You know, I've heard this before where UTA let us use the second quarter cent sales tax, that 92% for roads, and you know, thank you, I guess, is the response to that. My concern, though, as I've heard this come up a few times, is that this is our opportunity or our turn now to pay them back, and I think those, you know,
I'm not saying we have to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just concerned because I don't like, personally, I don't like things that are, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch your back, unless we have it in contract language. And that way it's clear and concise on what is going on. I mean, I would probably, I will be not in favor of, you know, let's do something here with the anticipation of down the road that this is going to be a payback or something like that. I think that's just kind of, it doesn't sit right with me. There's something wrong with that. The other one is when we talk about, you know, our money and that the timing's right to do it now, as if that, you know, this application is a one and done deal, it can't ever be looked at again, or the priorities can't be applied for again. I mean, I know we're close, and so you're sitting there thinking, well, let's just make it across the finish line with this, and then we have it. But, you know, these applications have been out there for a long time. And so it's, I have a hard time saying, okay, this is the only time and it's forever, you know, the only time it's ever going to have an opportunity to do this. I don't think that's totally accurate. There is opportunities in the future that could come up, could even be next year. I don't know. I'm just saying that those things can work through the process. If it's not this year, it could be next year. I don't know. But anyway, okay.
Let me, again, I'm using that as an example in terms of the use of the transit monies. I'm not suggesting that we have any obligation. I'm only saying that it does work the other way. And that therefore I'm okay with doing something in the reverse order, but it's not a requirement. As to the issue of the contract, we do have a contract with them relative to the repayment. That is in contract. And so I think right now, what has been said to us is that we do have an opportunity now. We have risen within the federal process to a point where we are being considered. And yes, it could be applied for later, but we don't know that we'll get there. The attitude that we communicate to the FDA and the federal vote may indicate that, gee, they're really not ready. And therefore, we aren't going to give them the funds. So anyway, there's a number of things at play there. And I just think
maybe I'm confused on the contract because we don't we don't have in contract language because they let us use part of the second quarter cent sales tax under contract that we therefore need to go forward and fund the BRT.
No, that's not
Okay,
part of
okay,
it.
that was what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
no, that is
There
not
is
in the
no-
contract.
right.
There's no contract for that. There is a contract, however, for repayment of what. we-
Oh, yes, oh, obviously, yes, okay.
That's what I
That's,
was getting at.
yeah, that's not what I was speaking. I was speaking to a different,
Thank you for clarifying. Okay. Are we ready to deal with this issue on the agenda?
I'd like to just kind of, talk briefly, between us, which is one of the only times that we get to talk as a commissioner.
That's Dave's
Right,
fault.
Dave? He watches us like a hawk, in which we can actually vet things back and forth, and you are able to watch. And so I would like to, to kind of vet through and see what the thought process is with finding a balance between voting yes on the bonding, but then holding it, because like they mentioned, just because we don't have to let it go through until we get a ratification from the citizens, one way or the other.
But as adopting the resolution does not bind us for the bond, however, because like they stated, we can, if the small starts grant does not get awarded,
Right.
we'll never issue it. So this is, for me, it's, you're climbing the stairs and this is step 7 to get to 12.
Well, I think my attempt,
Yeah, or 1 to get to 100.
well, my attempt is more specific, Commissioner Graves, to your concern that if we don't vote yes, that we're going to have on the bond, that we're going to have some liability. The county's going to have be at a have liability, legal liability. But if we do vote yes, then it takes us off that liability platform. And I think, as I've heard you speak as well, and it gives the opportunity for the citizens to weigh in on the matter and ratify or verify the direction that we go without putting ourselves at risk. That's what I'm trying to get.
Well, I think that's what the referendum does. And if they fulfill and do that process, I think that it does.
Okay.
Okay. Well, in making my motion, I would like to make a comment first. I would, Bill and I have not, excuse me, Commissioner Lee and I, sorry. We weren't a part of this process from the very beginning. In fact, we just come in and it was the previous commission, several city councils, several city engineers, MAG process, UTA, UDOT, that have all worked on this project. And so for all the work and hours that have gone into it, whether we like the process or not, thank you for doing your best at projecting and doing the best thing that you could for us. And so in keeping with all those people that have worked, I will offer my support and say I move to adopt for consideration for adoption the resolution as stated in regular agenda item 10.
So your motion is to adopt the
resolution.
And I would like to make a substitute motion.
Before you do that, are you going to second his motion?
I think I can make a substitute motion before.
We don't have a motion unless that was.
Say the second, I think, first.
Okay. So I'm
Okay, so we will dispense or I just had a brain freeze. Suspend, thank you. Suspend the normal rules and for making and seconding motions, and I will second that motion. Now then, go ahead.
okay. Thank you. I would like to make a second or to a motion that due to giving the public the opportunity to weigh in on this, that we try to find a balance between the two, and we vote to accept the resolution, but also that we will, as a commission, place it on the ballot for ratification either way from the citizens.
Is there a second?
Our next election is not till 2016.
Well, that's subject to what needs to be done, as we've stated over and over. It can be done this year.
Well, the rule of that motion dies. We don't have a second for it.
One more motion, Mr. Chair, if I could.
I mean, okay, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we strike this from the agenda, subject to coming back on in a month's time, therefore giving the public fair notice of what is happening here on the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'm not going to second for the sheer fact that when we talked about this, this is my own person. When we talked about this, the first couple of commission meetings that you and I were involved in, when everybody said to me, when are you guys could be addressing this? I said about mid-April. So I feel like for 3 months they've been ready.
Motion, Mr. Light was second also. I think, again, it's important to note that we do have a public process and it's moving forward with this. The public hearing, should this motion carry, would be April 12th, May 12th, pardon me, May 12th, 9 a.m. at this location. Okay, with that, then, all in favor of the motion to adopt the resolution relative to the item number 10 on our agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 2-1. Thank you. All right. Closed meeting.
Wait, we do have a work session. And do they still want to go today? It's not actually me, even though it says my name. They here. You are here for it, okay. I just want to make sure I didn't go who it was.
I, as the sheriff, you know.
He's here.
Oh, right there. You actually presenting. Hang on just a second. We'll be right there. Okay, do we need closed meeting for character and personal competence?
Yes.
Do we need a closed meeting for strategies as you discussed pending or reasonably on litigation? Do we need one for purchase, exchange, or lease of real property? I need a quick question. Let's have that one. Sale of real property. No.
I'll make a motion.
I
that
don't,
we
we
strike.
don't have the normal one relative to commercial information, so I assume there is none.
We just decided to drop that in case we'll put that on if needed.
I'll make a motion that we strike number 14.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to strike item number 14. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Okay, on these, as we set these meetings, I have been instructed that we need to each announce our own vote on these. Let's see, is it your turn, Greg? I don't like. Okay, you guys decide.
Commissioner Lee's turn.
My turn, okay. I'll make a motion that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals. Today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda and work session items.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. All in favor? No, I can't say that.
Greg votes aye.
Motion.
Commissioner Lee, aye.
Greg, aye.
Miller tonight.
What's
the motion carries? Public comment. Carries 3-0.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending and reasonable litigation. Set today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda and work session items.
Second.
And the following on the preceding closed meeting.
And did I skip that?
It's not written. I'm just saying that I'm putting order to the closed meetings.
Oh, I see. Okay. Why do you put that in there?
At the conclusion of the prior closed meeting.
At the conclusion of the prior closed meeting?
I'll second that again.
Have a motion and a second. We'll start with you, Commissioner Graves.
Greg, aye.
You opposed to your, never mind.
That just takes too much time, too many syllables.
Greg or Bill, Lee, Commissioner Lee.
Oh, sorry. It's fine. Commissioner Howard tonight. Motion carries 3-0. Okay.
And I will make a motion that we approve, set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, water rights, or water shares. Today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda and work session following the prior meeting. Closed meeting.
Second. Motion and a second to set a closed meeting for item number 13. As motion made, I guess it's my turn to start. Commissioner Howard, you vote yes. All right. Commissioner Green, aye. Commissioner Lee, aye. Motion carries 3-0 3 times. Okay, work session. The next item is a work session, presentation on the Wild Urban Interface Ordinance. We welcome you to Utah County, even though it's only a few blocks away.
Yes, thank you. Court Order State Fire Marshal. Can I approach the commission and give you some handouts? Would that be appropriate?
As long as the sheriff lets you.
We've risked it before.
Commissioners, thanks for allowing me some time with you today. Having been in the fire service the last 38 years, when you talk about BRTs, to me, that's a big red truck. So having a good informational boost today. But I wanted to just bring to your attention, we are meeting from the State Fire Marshal's office with every county commission across the state. I think yours is about number 21 or 22 out of the 29 counties. So
You had a lot of fun so far.
we're getting close to the end. It's been very, very interesting. I met with UF County yesterday, felt a little overdressed. I was one of the few without Levi's on. But, I appreciate the formality here in my county where I've been a lifelong resident. An issue a couple of years ago that came forward to the state legislature came out of King County and a couple of the other smaller counties, where they were frustrated because of certain things that were happening within the county in the unincorporated areas with regard to construction of small cabins, line shacks, and other things. And they actually put a bill together with Representative Noel that said the county commissioners should make the decisions on what codes are enforced, what codes should be done. And that, quite frankly, frightened me just a little bit. We've worked very hard with home builders associations and everything to have a statewide code, but yet have the opportunity at the local level to have some variations in that code. Obviously, we can't build the same home in St. George and then transport that same building to Park City. There are different parameters based on how the state goes. So what we wanted to do is just make you aware. This doesn't require any action on your part unless you so choose. What happened in Kane County was unfortunate, but we've worked with them and with the Association of Counties over the last year and a half to try to find some ways to assist the counties when they have that issue in the rural setting of having either cabins or other structures built where there's not water supply, where there's not adequate, or what is termed in the code a all-weather surface road, which typically is considerably improved, and defensible space. So currently, if you were to build a small building, you'd have to get a permit. You may have to put in electrical, even though you're 10 miles from the nearest source. In Kane County, the issue was in the number of these smaller areas where the ranchers wanted to have something other than a tent out in the middle of nowhere when they're calving or lambing their herds or flocks. They wanted to have just a structure there that they could utilize a few times each year without going through a big process of having a number of improvements. The difficulty was for fire response was these roads are often just dirt roads or maybe lightly gravel roads and didn't meet the minimum standard in the code. So what we've done is provided, and that's what your handouts, I'm mainly going to spend my time just on this yellow sheet. I'm just going to cover 3 basic points. The white sheet is more involved, more in depth. It covers all the same parameters as the yellow sheet and gives you reference for code reference changes if you choose, and if you feel like this is an issue within Utah County. And then the green sheet just has frequently asked questions that we've been able to resolve from other county commission meetings that we've held. So the 3 areas where if you have this area, and I know working when I was with Provo City Fire, working with Tom Rowe and other previous fire marshals, that there were some issues, but they were not quite the same as what we're talking here. We're talking here to structures that are 1,000 square feet or less. We picked this number. Dayton ran a bill on last year on fruit stands, and we asked her to keep the fruit stands fairly small, and that's allowed them to build a fruit stand without a permit of any kind. And we worked it out with her to be 300 square feet. It was modified in committee to be 600. When it went to the floor, it went to 1,000 square feet. So that's a lot bigger than we wanted it to be, but that's why we based it on 1,000 square feet, because there are other structures. If a building does, if they do want electrical, if they do want plumbing and those kind of things, they would still have to go through a permit process, and it would not affect the provisions that we're just suggesting that you may want to review. So first is a small building. If it's already 1,000 square feet and they want to add, it can't be any more than 25% of the existing. So if they had a cabin already and you decided to move this forward, they could add a room on, for example. The other areas, we add the definition approved. And so this allows you as a commission to decide what roads are approved rather than having an all-weather surface or an asphalted road. The difficulty in Kane County was a lot of these roads went across federal properties, and there was no way for them to get an all-weather surface without going to the federal government for approval to make those roads that way. So first is the size, second is approval, or make the roads approvable at your level. And the third deals with water, which is obviously the biggest area. So we talked about in here defensible space, and this is not to protect a cabin or line shack from a wildland fire. This is try to protect the wildland in the forest from a cabin fire, if that makes sense. So all we're trying to do is just give you the same tools and opportunity that we've given, or at least presented to the other counties. This may or may not be something you feel like it needs to be addressed, but we wanted to make sure that all the county commissions were aware that if there's potential or you have some issues in the rural setting with these small structures, that there is some language here, some sample language that you could potentially adopt if you felt like that was an issue. I certainly recommend visiting with Sheriff Tracy and with Kevin Cortez and others in the fire to have some wildland fire experience there to help guide you, direct you, and if we can be of any service in the future, we just appreciate the opportunity to come and present this to you and say, it is an issue in some of the counties. It may not be in your county, but this is how we've recommended that some of the more rural areas deal with this if it's an issue. So.
Thank you. Can I ask you a quick question? This is not related to this necessarily, but it has just recently been brought to our attention about problems with burning wood pallets. How come we haven't addressed that, or is that something that we just need to do county by county, or that's more of an issue?
Yeah, it really depends on how you deal, how you want to decide. So the only thing that's really allowed for burning is recreational burning. And so if someone broke up a pallet and used that to roast marshmallows or hot dogs, that would be, but they usually are required or asked to have a permit or at least notification of dispatch. So there's a lot of issues there. We went to Summit County and had a similar question, and they asked what we were going to do about burn barrels up there, and we had to tell them the burn barrels have been outlawed for about 10 years. So who's going to come do this? We said, well, you're the county commissioner, so.
I just was curious.
Yeah, it's more of a nuisance issue potentially. We get complaints from burning railroad ties with creosote and other things, but it just depends on how the people are actually utilizing that and whether their neighbors are in favor of doing that every day or every once a month.
Well, thank you for all you do.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are they back on 402.2 water supply?
Yes.
And it's under the exception portion of that. If I'm understanding this, it basically says an exception to these codes or buildings less than 1,000 square feet. It's the second part that brings the question to my mind. It's the structure that originally did not exceed 1,000 when adding an addition of 25% or less. So that would give the ability of exceeding 1,000 feet, it seems.
If it's existing, if you pass this ordinance and someone had a building that was already 1,000 square feet and wanted to add, you could allow that to be added if you chose to add that exception. But any new buildings would have to be limited to 1,000 square feet.
And the exception we're talking about there is a permit?
Only, well.
Or is it an exception to having to have a water supply?
To having a water supply and to have the defensible space around us. So that, again, the cabin catches on fire, it does not spread to the wildland. We're not trying to protect the cabin. There's not enough water to do that. And most of the small tenders that would go out from the volunteer areas would not have the amount of water available. So in the question and answer, we addressed that quite a bit more. So a cabin that's 1,000 square feet would be required at a minimum to have 2,000 gallons of water. And if you actually look and do the dimensions, if they make it just a tiny bit bigger, it goes to 3,000 gallons. And so what we want to do is keep the space available so that a cabin that's on fire, that you can't get water there or in a timely fashion, will burn up the cabin, but will not extend into the wildland.
I'm assuming that this would be a one-time.
Right, this would be
So,
just.
so the maximum, and I would suggest if we're gonna do this, that we put in our maximum 1,250. Otherwise, they could come back 10 years down the road and say, oh, I'm just adding.
I'm adding another 25% and another 25%.
Am I consistent, is my thinking consistent with what you're saying?
And that would be prudent. And again, this is more for temporary use type structures, not for a second home or a cabin in the woods. And again, if they have improvements there, they're going to have to meet the current code on that. This is just basically an unimproved cabin where you're just out there pretty much roughing it.
Could they build multiple 1,000 square foot dwellings right next to each other?
As long as they have defensible space. It's your choice. We're just saying this is a real issue in Kane County, enough to where they felt strongly enough to come to the legislature and try to resolve it in a way that we felt like this was a better way to approach it. And so county by county, if you're not seeing that you've got the issue in an area where they're a considerable distance from any improvement infrastructure, then this probably isn't an issue that you need to address. But if it is, you get out, beyond Jamola and out that way, and somebody just wants to build something out there, but doesn't have electrical, doesn't have all of those kind of things, and wants to create a defensible space so that any issue that happens with their property doesn't create a problem for the county or for the wildland crews.
All of the other requirements for construction and permitting and that are still in place.
Still in place. This is just small buildings that, and again,
Even for the small building, I'm getting it.
if they're going to attach to any infrastructure, then they still would be required to have the permits and all those other related fees and everything else.
But if they don't, then they wouldn't have to get a permit.
No,
No, that's what I'm saying, is that section of the code stands by itself. This is only dealing with the fire portion of it.
Right.
Whatever
So if they wanted to build 1,000 square feet, they still have to, if that's the parameters for your community, sometimes 1,000 square feet is the trigger for having a permit, even if they didn't have electrical. But if they pulled the permit and wanted to have electrical, then they'd have to have those additional permits on to the building permit. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that's exempted right now are fruit stands from total permit processes. They don't get up to 1,000 square feet. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate your time. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I'll have some pins up there. It's our 50-year anniversary of being the state fire marshal, so we just want to share the weapons enough for some of your staff.
That looks official. If we were there, we could possibly get places we shouldn't get.
Absolutely, you can crowd this room just a little bit more. So. Thanks so much.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
So you may have said this and I missed it. Have you distributed this information to the fire wardens and the fire?
Yes, we actually met with Brian Cottom, who's the state forester, and he has all those fire wardens. So we've tried to, where we could, especially in the rural settings, to have the fire wardens there with us, not necessarily present, but just to make sure that they understand. And it's a tough issue because they come to you and say, we can't allow this building to be built, and yet it's not being used except for just these rare occasions, and the commission ends up in a tight spot, and that's where the Kane County people were. So this is just a tool in your toolbox if you decide to utilize it to resolve an issue that you may have. So.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, if you feel like we need to do something along this line, you need to initiate. Is that fair to ask? Or?
Yeah, if we could look at maybe what's been the problems in the past, and I hate to just do something unless we've seen that there's a need for it, or there's, and if you could kind of run down through that, it'd be great.
Okay, not a problem. I'll get with Jack Snow, the fire marshal.
Good.
The ordinances are more under his jurisdiction, but the violin portion, that's possible.
Thank you. Boy, thank you for bringing that to us. All right, with that, now then, our agenda is to the point where we will move on into our closed session. Thank you.